if you work in any sort of creative capacity or run your own business, generally the work-life balance can be a bit of a struggle. I know it is for me, it has been, and it's something I've been working on a lot. I had the opportunity to interview Joel Beukelman, who is a designer himself. He works at Google, used to work at Netflix, and he runs a podcast called The Balance, where he has conversations with other creatives about that topic of work-life balance, and it's definitely worth a listen. I just had the opportunity to be interviewed by him. You can check it out. It's thebalancepodcast.cc, and it's awesome. But yeah, this is a great interview. It has a lot of great tips and just things to say about what he's learned through interviewing other people and his seek for balance. But have a listen. Hope you love it. I'm Braden Flynn, and this is The Artist Report. I did it all for you. Well, I hope you know the lengths I've gone. So you're a dad of a couple kids.
Yes.
A husband. Boys. Yeah. And your wife works
awesome,
just a little bit.
And busy. Yeah. You know, only like 100, 120 events a year. So
crazy.
Just a couple.
Yeah. So ultimately through that, I would love to just get into a discussion about balance, and because that's something that I know, just listening to your podcast, you and your buddies have always just talked about that, and now it's become something you sort of built a brand around it. Yeah. But what is how do you, if you were to describe balance, what are you seeking in life between work and life?
For me, it's trying to actually mimic what I would say on paper my priorities are, and actually have those reflect in my actual, whether it's my budget or my mind space or my time.
Yeah.
And not in a rigid way, but in a genuine way, trying to actually put God or my family first and not my work, right? And usually it is work because that's what I'm most focused on, but really trying to figure out how to make that a priority and make sure those things are altruistic. And so it's been a process, and I was working for myself. I had a lot of dark times being, unemployed and just trying to figure stuff out. I got a photography because it was just to make ends meet, and in that time I found a lot of ways for me to manage my creative process and be balanced creatively, and how one, I could kind of grind and get stuff done and be unbalanced, but how to not burn out that way. But from a family perspective, I've slowly learned yes, I wake up early because I need to for my family, and I need to embrace that and spend that time with my boys to be a good dad. Also, that allows me to get into work and hustle really hard before anyone's there, and that also allows me to be productive enough to leave at 5 and have dinner with my family. So one, I'm killing it at work in my own specific way that's not necessarily normal to the general model. Most tech is people strolling at 10 o'clock, super, they stay late, drink Red Bull and bourbon, but
and bourbon.
I offset that, right? I get a lot done when no one's there, have some meetings, and I'm bouncing out because I'm the family guy, which is great. And it's obviously there's a switch there, because I used to be my recipe was tall glass of rum and Coke after a big cup of coffee, and I could go for a good 6 hours till 2 or 3 in the morning and kill it.
Which then, as a dad, now you're up at 5:36.
Yeah, I was trying to do that, and then my son would wake up at 2 o'clock and need to be fed, and then it's oh my gosh, I gotta be a dad, right? So that is part of it was me maturing as a designer and in my field, and also becoming a dad and learning how to be a good husband. I've only been married 6 years, which is a long time, it feels but
feels like
it
forever.
Takes a long. I know, jeez. No, but it being married is hard. It's work. You got to figure out how to truly pour yourself into someone else and be the best person you can be to that person, and with work and all those other distractions, it becomes hard. And so, becoming a real adult with buying a house, having a career, and having a family, all of those things have been developing, and I feel the more that I'm doing that, the more I'm finding balance to be essential to be successful. Not in a business way, but just to feel good about what I'm doing as a human or as a creative. So
yeah, what you were saying earlier, just how you make your family a priority, or you're coming up with some sort of tools. What, I guess, internally, what does it look like for that balance? I guess, are you telling yourself something in terms of expectations for fulfillment, you know, and
Right.
where are you seeking, or are you seeking it like in work? Are you seeking it
Yeah.
are you feel like, and I'm asking these questions because I have the worst work-life
That's hard.
balance out
Yeah.
there. And I'm seeking balance.
I think for me, a lot of it has been, so in my new talk, I'm kind of developing it now. I'm giving it in October, but I'm doing a whole section on like perspective, because anyone that's been in a creative field has started and like looked at people they admire and like, oh, I want to be that, and like, why can't I produce that work? And the thing you don't realize getting into a new thing or new art is that like they've put in their time, like they've been grinding, right? So
Yeah.
new photographers are looking at Brain's like, oh my gosh, Brain's shooting these cool events and he's got this awesome portfolio. How does he do all this? And it's like, you'll get there. You just need to focus on you right now. Like, sure, like dream big, but have realistic expectations of where
Right.
you're at. And I did that with design too. Like, look at all these guys. Like, oh my gosh, how are you guys doing that stuff? And it's all about that process. And so I think part of staying sane is having the right expectations, so that you can be content. Like, as soon as you're discontent, like, you're imbalanced, I think. And I feel like if there's one thing that I'll never get is like how to just truly be content. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's, if you can get that and just be happy with like less, like that's
Totally.
that's huge. And even like in my job, so like if someone stays at a tech position for 3 years, it's like you're like 10 years, like it's a long time.
Yeah.
Like, I met a guy that was been at his company for 10 years at Google. He was there when he was like number 18, and Google's got like some 60 or 90,000 people now. He's like, they just treat me good, like I'm at a good place. But for designers, it's like a 2-year churn. And
Yeah.
so like I'm down here in Google in Southern California for the long term, but there's always new opportunities, always really cool stuff. And so it's hard to, and like the conversation about balance, it's hard to like say like, no, I'm happy, like this is good, everything else is potentially better, right? But you can't always keep looking, like grass is greener.
One of the things like really that what I was getting at sort of like with our life stage is it really like, yeah, sure, we're becoming sort of experts in what we're doing, but it's like I still feel like to get where I want to be, like I have to be doing so much more. I need to be out, and like one of my
You have to hustle
strengths.
to get
Yeah,
there,
totally.
right?
Yeah, it's like you have to be like at every event. You've got to be like I need to be coming up with more personal projects. I need to be shooting
Yeah.
more. I need to be out more. I need to be taking on. You know, it's like I'm not able to shoot the bands. I'm barely. You know, it's like I can't do any of the
Sure.
stuff that I want to be doing to be as successful as I want to be. But it's this internal like. But I also recognize I want to be a better dad because I have been working too
Yeah.
much. You know, so it's this struggle of.
We're always scared because like I need to keep pushing because like someone's behind me.
Yeah.
This is good. Well, first of all, like of course, any good creative like is their biggest critic, and so I think we all have that like internal drive to do that. The second thing I think is like perspective, and that you have to be realistic on like where you're at, and we're always gonna strive for. There's always someone gonna be better, and I think that's good, and it should drive us, and that's like the journey to becoming better. The thing that I've been finding for myself is that, like what I do is very temporary. Like we create something and it releases in like 6 months or a year later, it's being redesigned, right? So there's no permanency to like what I do with like UI design, but there's this level of the better you get at something and the more you mature, I feel like I'm getting quicker.
Right.
Right. So I'm at a point now where it's like I can take on other side projects. If I really want to like climb a ladder, sure, I need to hustle a little bit. But if I want to maintain and like still execute at the level I am, I feel like I'm getting better and better at that. So someone else is coming in brand new, they're hustling and staying late because they haven't been through the experiences I've been through. And like it's not a lot. Like I've only been doing this a little bit of time, but you learn in a quick paced environment where it's like, you know, sink or swim. You learn quick. And so I feel like tools are a big deal. I talked about the Pixel Pretty Damn Perfect talk. Like the tools you use, making sure you're doing the right way is huge. Like using the right equipment. Like I remember when I was like shooting photo, like having a fast computer, like quick, cards
Oh, yeah.
and like and the right software is huge. It'll
That's
save
it.
you hours and hours. So it's like there's some investment
Yeah.
into like what you do, and I think the more you do it, the more you learn. But as far as like balancing like progressing in a career, progressing as a dad, like that's super hard.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I have an answer for that. Like I'm trying to figure that. And I feel like I don't think there is an answer. I think a lot of it's journey. And me and Aaron, my buddy on the podcast, we talk about that a lot. It's like you might find this Zen moment where like you are balanced, but
Yeah.
realistically it's more like you're just trying to get more balanced. And that's the point, is like you're
Uh-huh.
always trying to just like push things in the right places and like get your things right. But I don't think there's ever a point where you arrive and you're like, all right, everything's good now, I'm balanced, and like we'll sit here, because everything's always changing. Like everything's, you know, you don't control those variables. But I think it's the awareness that is happening and being able to talk about it, I think, is a big deal.
Did you read the book The Alchemist?
I haven't, no.
Pretty sure that's what it's called. But ultimately,
yeah, I'll look it up.
I'll link to the, if it's not The Alchemist, I'll link to the correct book
Sure.
in the notes.
Show notes.
But in the show notes. But basically, the moral of the story, it's this deal where he's like sent on this journey and this task, and ultimately the punchline is like being able to, like, he's got to carry this stuff in the spoon and not spill it, but he's like so focused he misses everything. It's like the deal is you got to carry the stuff in the spoon but see everything going on around. Like so often, you get so focused that you're not actually able to be present where you are, and that's the thing that it's a lot of it has to do with like how you're thinking, you know, your perspective on just like, I'm gonna actually be it's intentionality, you know. It's like I'm gonna be intentionally present with my kids when I'm home, instead of coming home and feeling like I didn't get enough done at the office, and my wife called me home to get home earlier than I wanted to be because I just got into the office at 10, now I'm home at 4:30. It's like, versus like, hey, hard. Like, how about just knowing like, okay, but this is where I should be, this is where I need to be, and this is good, you know, versus like, if you don't allow yourself to go there, then you're never content again, which you live in this just
one of the guys we talked
turmoil.
to was like, I think it was our first guest that we had. His name's Drew Wilson. He's a genius. He's a designer in San Diego. He like designs and codes and does the business of like everything, and he's got like 12 projects going at once. But he works at home, like in his home office, and he said the big switch for me was learning that like my kids knocking on the door and interrupting me wasn't a nuisance, like it was a blessing. Like that was time for me to actually be a cool dad, and that I don't know how to do that. Like that's really hard. Like I don't work at home. When I'm working from home, I'm at a coffee shop, because I don't in the office, I can't work at home, and I don't know how to do that. But I think it's a big maturity there, and like understanding like your responsibilities and having confidence even that like I'm okay to spend this time with my kid because I can go get this work done later. But those two worlds are very separate for me, you know, so I don't really have that. But it's hard. Like I think intentionality is big, and being aware of like what your goals are and making sure you're trying to do those things. And that's been, like, you talk about like going home early, that's like, for me, it's like shifting the focus. Like that is my priority right now. Like, yes, work is important, but that is a priority, and I'll figure out the other things later.
Right. One of the things that I've been trying to tell myself, or just when I'm talking to people and giving advice, because I tend to give advice that I don't listen to myself, is that it's really, if you never define success, whether that's like life success or business success or whatever, if you never define it, it's hard to ever feel like you've arrived there.
Sure.
You know, so I never arrived there, even though I know like I have been successful and I am successful.
Well, have you defined it?
Nope.
Okay, this is that whole like.
I know, but like this is the stuff that I'm working through right now. Yeah. It's like I'm in a
like, what's your end game?
Yeah, I don't take advice for myself, and I'm trying to. I'm at a place in my life that I'm realizing that if you have your metaphorical cup, you know, my cup is so empty that I'm needing to find balance. You know,
that's a big thing that I cognitively made a switch when I moved from the Bay Area to Southern California, like knowing that like in our industry, like you're known by like, I shipped this thing, we got acquired, we did these things, and you're known for the work you ship and you build. And I took a job in Irvine outside of the Bay Area, knowing that like, no, I don't want to be known for the stuff I build. Like I work on very obscure products most people don't even know Google owns, but I did that because I wanted to be known as like a good dad. Right? I want to go to the beach on the weekend. I want to be present with my family. And so I internally I still want to build cool shit. I want to be like an awesome creative, be known for stuff I do.
Right.
But that urge of me knows that like that is somewhat empty, and so like success looks different in that model, right? So I could be successful. I could build a good product and get acquired by Google or by a big company, but that's financial gain. Some of those things I still would love to do that, and like I feel like that's still my end game, but I try to like the process balance is like focusing that like no, my end game is actually making sure I'm a good dad, whether I am getting financial gain or notoriety from my job, right? And so that's that being another part of this isn't like a schlocky pitch for my talk, but like another thing I've been thinking about is like your identity. Like you design an identity and you live around that identity. You hang out with people you want to be identified with, and that's good. But that solely can't be your identity. Is like what you create, because if that is, then whether you're creating good stuff or not, like your whole temperament and your whole mood is anchored around that, and you're always striving for the next thing. And so it's like
that's me.
Yeah, it's hard though. Like I'm a designer. That's what people say. What do you do? I'm a designer at Google. Nice to meet you. But the reality is, like, whether I'm good at that or not, like I'm a dad. I'm a lot of other things. I'm a musician. Like I'm all these things, and I should have my pride in that and be known for that. And so that's what I'm trying to like. I'm trying to find that as success, as hard as it is. But I think that's the whole thing. Is I don't think I'll ever get there. Like I don't think that's ever realistic that you can just completely arrive. But that's what I'm trying to go down that path rather than executing and being like Steve Jobs. Like he's amazing. Like the man was amazing. He's changed the world forever. But like he's very well much known as like a guy that like neglected a lot of his family and like had a lot of hard relationships and like was a workaholic. And that's I don't want to be that guy. I'd rather be like a good dad than a Steve Jobs. And that's hard to say. It sounds kind of like dumb, like I'm like pitching my book or something, but like it's like altruistically that's how I really want to proceed, as hard as it is.
But you look at most models of people who have been crazy successful, who are like, I forget where I heard it, but it was someone giving this example. Like he was talking to his dad, I think, and he was saying like he wants to be the best at whatever he's doing.
Right.
And the dad stops him and asks like, hey, like, okay, let's say it's photography. Name the best photographers in the world. And the kid could list like 5. It's like, okay, so out of all the photographers in the world, you want to be one of these 5 guys? It's like
you want to bump one of them out.
Yeah, well, it's like, first of all, that's a really daunting task. Second of all, it's like, okay, let's look at their lives. Let's look at Richard Abbott. Like, how many of these guys, like, as a photographer, like, they're going through divorce, like multiple divorces. It's like,
of course,
to get success, and then you end up like dying alone, and it's like, so it's really like, okay, like, is that really what you want, or what is important, and actually thinking about it, and if you don't stop and think about it, it's always this figment of your imagination that you're striving for, and it's like, do you really want, like, sort of, you do want that, because like, who doesn't want that to a degree, but at the same time, at the cost of what, and what actually is important, and what is success, like,
it becomes very spiritual in a way that like from my context growing up as like a pastor's kid, like you're always trying to fill like that empty hole, right? And regardless of what you believe, like, people are looking for like acceptance and fulfillment, and if you're only validated like by being successful, then you will always chase that and never be satisfied. And that's a dangerous path to go down. I think most of us like in our American culture do that. Like we know that like being successful is good, you make money and like you have power, and that's like what we're striving for. But oftentimes you find most people, and there's actually oh my gosh, I wish I could remember. I've watched like every documentary on Netflix, but there's a because when you work there, everyone like shares like the weird like corners of Netflix. But there's a documentary on Netflix, and it talks about, I think it's called Happy actually, but it talks about like the level of happiness. They did these studies, and
Pursuit of Happiness.
No, I think it's I think it's called Happy, but it talks about like they interviewed different people from different economic statuses, and really like there's like a threshold from like $60K a year to like, I think it was like 80 or 100 a year, and then above that, like, you don't get any happier until you hit like $1 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there's this big spectrum of like you're just making more money and you're not happy.
Right.
And so there's plenty of people living in middle America in a modest home with a pretty like boring job that are just stoked.
Yeah.
Like their day sucks at
Yeah.
work, but they're going home, they're barbecuing, they're with their
Going
friends.
out to the lake on the weekends.
Yeah, they're like living life and they have that happy, and it's not around this pursuit of like doing something more. And I think as a creative, that's the hardest part, is that like our identity is so tied to like what we do and what we create. We love our jobs, and so like we get our satisfaction from being successful at what we do. And so that's like this never ending like fight to continually be better, because we get satisfied from that. And I think that's good, because it pushes creative. I think we need that, but we have to be aware that like that exists, and that there's other important things like being with people, like having a drink, being a dad, surfing, like whatever that is for you. I always like skew it dad wise because I'm a dad, but like even people that are in like just your girlfriend, go like take her
out,
your girlfriend out, like go take her out, go to Napa, do something cool, like, you know, hang out with some nerd at the mall, do something cool, like be a human, like be human. Super cheesy, but like the human being, but don't be a human being, be a human doer. Like just do something like that's not for your personal gain. And I think that there's somewhat of like a understood benefit there, but like when you actually do it with the right intent, I think there's a benefit. But it's hard. I'm not saying I'm saying it's what I'm striving for. Like it's a process.
What, with all of the people that you've interviewed so far for the Balance podcast, what are some things that you feel like you've really learned or gleaned from some people that are balancing?
One of the biggest things is intentionality, and like whether that's being intentional on like what is success or what like fulfills me, that's a big deal. Being intentional on time, like productivity, knowing that like, no, I'm doing this right now and I'm gonna get this done. I'm gonna eliminate all distractions, or I'm at dinner and I'm gonna enjoy this person and like put my phone in my car. Like being intentional and making sure that you're ever present in almost like a Buddhist way is something that has come up all the time. And I think that's really, I think it's contrary to like the American culture. Like if you go to a lot of like Southeast Asia, like any place outside of Western culture, they really get that. They don't understand why we're so busy. So intentionality has been big. Setting rules, like proper boundaries for yourself, whether that's with you or with like your coworkers or like your wife or whatever, that's been big for me too. That I've learned like from the podcast, and I've implemented it like with my wife.
It's pretty cool.
Like,
book called
like
Boundaries.
I'll be home at 5. Like I'm coming home for dinner. And I might leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you got the kids in the morning, but like I'll be home at 5. And so making sure that you have some sort of accountability or structure that you can say like, I'm going to do this and commit to it. I think even if you fail at it, you still have some guilt, like a good guilt to actually be better in that process to being balanced. Those are probably the two biggest things that come about, like people setting boundaries and making sure they're being intentional and not reactionary. Like being reactionary, you're just like chasing, and which requires you to binge, and then you burn out, and then you're just like, it's an endless cycle of bad.
I think as creatives, and especially like if you're working for yourself as a creative, it is really difficult if you don't create some sort of structure for what work looks like.
Well, it's tenfold if you're with yourself. Like I couldn't do it. That's why I work for a company. And I'm scared of the day that like I get bit by the thing, like I have to do this thing because I'll have to do it, and I'll probably hire somebody that's really good at developing structure. But it's crucial to being productive.
Because if you don't have it, there's this constant, like, it's one, you're wasting time. Two, there's just like so much, like you go after the meeting, it's like so many different things that just create this internal, I keep saying it's this internal turmoil because I think I feel this a lot, you know?
No, it's very true. And I think the hardest thing is that we all, I forget what was a comedian was talking about it. Someone was talking about like, I know I'm fat. Like I know what I need to do to not be fat, but I'm still fat, right? And that's the internal struggle. Like I know that like when I have an Americano and like some good metal on, I can crunch in 2 hours and get 8 8 hours of work done.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll have like Twitter and email open.
Right.
Sometimes Netflix. I'm kind of working, chatting.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm not being productive then, but it's a habit.
Yeah.
And so the people that are like hyper productive,
Yeah.
like the guy Drew Wilson I mentioned,
Uh-huh.
like he knows how to be productive.
Right.
And he is very intentional about being productive.
Yeah.
Because it's his like livelihood. And I think some people that are like super producers, like in a dumb term, but like Elon Musk like has done a ton of stuff. These are guys that just know how to like optimize their time.
Yeah.
Because everyone has 24 hours. So people that know how to like execute and be efficient at the highest rate, and fight that human nature to just kind of chill out.
Right.
Those are the guys that are the best at it. But I think that the key thing is being able to turn that off.
Yeah.
And to stop that.
Right.
Because that's addictive to be like, I'm killing it. Like I'm doing everything so good.
Because when you stop, it feels like...
Yeah, that's like, how do you stop, right?
Yeah.
Like my wife's in Hawaii right now for a week, and she was like, you want to come out? I didn't have the vacation days, but even when I could, I don't want to go to Hawaii for a week, because like 7 days, I'm just learning how to like stop,
Yeah.
right? I need a good 2 weeks to slow down,
Yeah.
to not be checking notifications,
Yeah.
you know? And it's a real rhythm that we don't get here. And
Yeah.
anytime you get outside of America, like I mean, not anywhere in the world, but like most places are very much different pace. But it's around family, it's around,
Yeah.
communities.
It's around
it's a lot
meals.
Of, it's not focused on
yeah.
like what you do and how you make money,
Totally.
you know?
Yeah. In a transition to productivity, because I feel like to have balance, you need to be efficient
Yeah.
when you're working.
Mhm.
And productive, like what you were saying, like the guys that can produce are the guys that are successful. So with that, what are some tools that you use, or like through people you've talked to that are like really great for productivity and
Sure.
efficiency, in terms of like how you can get your work done
Yeah,
quick?
for sure. So
Couple favorite tools.
So number one, Google.
Yeah.
It's not like me drinking Kool-Aid. Like literally, the tools that go, like even just like Gmail and Calendar and
Yeah.
Docs, and the collaboration and the efficiency of those products, like has changed how I work. Have worked before I was at Google.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal. Specifically for design, Keynote, and it's a talk I do sometimes, like piggybacking my buddy Ted that lives in the Bay Area. He was from Apple, and we work in Keynote. It's a very light software to design in, and that's huge. And we swear we can design circles around people because we're focusing on like the idea and the product rather than like the exact pixels.
Right.
That's huge. But I think more than anything, like being productive and executing is less about tools and more about knowledge. And so I think I've been able to like piggyback and jump up the ladder quicker than someone might think, like
Right.
to work at Google is. Like me and my wife talk about like, oh my gosh, you work at Google. I'm like, I don't know. Like I've tricked them. Like I don't know how I work
Right.
there. Like I don't, because it wasn't a plan. Like you said earlier, I didn't be like, I want to work for
I've
Google.
heard of them. It's a small
That's
company.
what I'm gonna do. It's a small company.
Tech.
I was doing some small print design, and I like stumbled into tech, and it just kind of like it consumed me, and I just like
Yeah.
got like sucked into it. And it's been great, and I'm like super grateful that I'm there. But it wasn't a goal that I like was trying to hit.
Right.
It just happened, and it's been a great ride. But I think that I mean the part of the reason that was able to happen is that I was very involved in community around people that like I aspired to be like, or people that
Mhm.
were attracted to me from like a creative standpoint.
Yeah.
And so I think like being a part of community and trying to learn as much from people that are willing to like give to you is probably more valuable than any tool you'll have. And even now, like being in Orange County, my wife obviously works with you and with a lot of other people in the wedding industry. And as a wedding photographer, I watched your work and Gabe's work and a lot of these people's work and like idolized it because I was trying to be a wedding photographer. And now I'm friends with all of these dudes, and it's like the only way that you can ever be those people is to like literally hang out with those people and understand those people. And now I'm doing design, I'm not trying to do photography, so it's
Right.
great. Like we're almost on like parallel paths, but I feel like there's this weird community and people really drive like progress, right? Like if I'm gonna get super nerdy, like Apple and Google have human interface guidelines and standards and specs on how you should design a phone app. But those specs and those standards are influenced by third-party developers that innovate and create things. So a trend becomes popular because the community, they adopt that, and that becomes like the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like in becoming a creative, you have to be able to surround yourself with the community and be a part of that community to understand how it works, and that will get you so much further than like learning a dumb software, because everyone hacks software different ways. Everyone has different like workflows, and so I think the biggest thing like in being productive has been finding the smartest dude in the room and being like, dude, like, can I buy you a coffee?
Yeah.
Can we hang out? Like, and it seems like desperate, but it really goes a long way.
Totally.
And I've met some really cool people and have a lot of good friends because I'm somewhat vulnerable and like innocent in the way that's like show me your ways. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and I think most people are pretty cool. Like, you idolize someone, they're just a dude. They're like, sure, like, whatever, like, come hang out, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that our creative, like, photo design, animation, a lot of our creative communities have that. There's this camaraderie where they're like, yeah, like, I'd be glad to share this. Not this competition, but it's a good, healthy camaraderie.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's huge. Like, if you can just finding a mentor, you know, or just anyone where you can say, hey, listen, I will like, what would be helpful for you? Like, I will do this for free. Like, I will like,
yeah,
let's either buy you a drink
right.
or like.
Well, that was like the initial internship,
yeah.
right? Like, I'll work for free to learn your thing, right?
Yeah.
And that, I think that's been made a model, but it's very much a core part of the like Sansei creative process. Where you like study under someone to get the thing.
Totally. Which doesn't happen enough in our culture anymore. You know, it's like you used to like be the apprentice to then the skilled person.
Sure.
But yeah, so I love this topic. You know, this has been
Of
killer.
course.
Like, if you were to say the most important, like, if someone has to change something that, like, let's say they feel like way out of balance, and they needed to change something in their life, and they're on this path to maybe being a successful creative, like, what would, and I think you've probably already said it, you know, but it's like, be intentional.
Well, yeah, more than anything, I think it feels like manufactured when I say it, but there is this, because it's said so much by like books and like self-help stuff, but the reality of truly finding like what makes you happy or what's gratifying, like if that is being a successful creative and that's all that matters to you, and all you want to be a Steve Jobs, then do that.
Yeah.
Do that tenfold. Like, if that makes you happy, then do that.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes get lost in that, and what truly makes us happy isn't what we do as creatives. And so the thing I've learned and what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to encourage people to do, like through my speaking events and my blog, is like saying like, look, like the world's big, there's lots of things to do. You create cool stuff, that's great, you're good at it, but like, if, like for me, sitting in fresh water, cold with a beer, is like my favorite thing in the world. Whether it's a freshwater river or a high mountain lake, like drinking beer in a cold body of water is my favorite thing in the world. And I'm driving up to Kern River this weekend to go sit in cold water and drink beer. Like, that makes me happy, that like fills me up, right? And I think the more you can define those things, being with my kids and going to the beach and with my family is huge. The more you can define those things, saying like, that's success, and focus on that, and everything else like bends to that reality or that success model, I think is when people will feel balanced, they'll be happy. And it's contrary to a lot of how we think, but I think the more that people can focus on what truly is fulfilling, I think that's valuable. And that could be spiritual, it could be health, it could be fitness, it could be lots of things. And it's almost all of those things for me. But the more you can be intentional and think about that, I think that's core.
I love that. You know, and I think I want to challenge like you, audience. Basically, in that is, if you can, like, I want to challenge people, and I'm going to challenge myself to sit down and really think of, like, define success, define, like, I think, like you've said several times, like, if you are identifying like, if you find your identity in your work or your success, like, that can
It
happen, like,
exists.
with
I
your
did it
weight,
for a
it
long
could
time.
be, like, totally.
When you're in college and you're starting out, like, all I did was, like, try and get work done and get a solid portfolio. That's all you care about, and
Yeah.
that at that point, it's probably the most important thing you could do, right?
Yeah. And what happens is, if you do not define things, and if you don't like, either set goals or define success, or things just happen in your internal deal. Like, you might not say, like, oh, I'm finding my identity in my success, but
Right.
what's happening under the surface is that's what's happening. Like, that's what's driving you. So it's like challenging people, like, to sit down and actually define, like, hey, what do I actually want out of life? Yeah, sure, you got to pay bills. Sure, you got to support your family, and you got to work to do that. But, like, is it, like, do you want to be working, like, all day
Sure.
long, and, like, is that the end goal?
Yeah.
Or is being with your family and like actually spending time with your kids, or spending time with your girlfriend, or that, like, is that important? So, like, really define that, and I think it'll be revolutionary in
Right.
terms of how you view what you do.
No, absolutely. Like, as a creative, I love building and doing what I do, and I get paid well to do it.
Yeah.
If my end game, like my dream job, is to exit big enough so I don't have to work,
Right.
and so that I can, like, I want to create beats. I want to, like, write dubstep beats, because it's, like, the perfect mix of, like, metal and digital. I want to write dubstep beats, and I want to, like, build cool furniture
Yeah.
and, like, hang out with my family.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with what I do now, but, like, that's my ideal, like, creative world. And so I think that, like, not having your identity solidified in what you do
Yeah.
for a living is huge.
Yeah. It's huge. Well, hey, man, thanks so much for doing
So
this.
good, man.
Yeah,
So good.
totally. And so check out The Balance. What is it?
So we have the blnce.com,
Yeah.
which is the old domain, or thebalance.cc.
And if they want to find the podcasts in iTunes, it's just
It's linked
still
up on the page.
Okay.
If you search The Balance Podcast, it shows up.
yeah. But definitely check that out. I've listened to pretty much every interview on there.
It's more
and and they're rad. And just hopefully that you can actually glean something from this. I know I have, because I am so out of balance, and
I'll keep you accountable.
Thank you.
We live down the street.
Yeah, please do. But yeah, well, hey, thanks so much for coming, and hope you guys like this. Peace out. Thanks so much for Joel for taking the time for that interview. Balance is something that we all just need to be seeking more of. And I'm going to have a full version of that episode in podcast form once I launch the podcast. It should be coming soon. But I cut out a lot from there. So hope you loved it. Hope you got something from it. And hope you seek some balance in your life. Tune in until next time.